Nuclear War Survival Skills, Chapter 9, Food Continued, page 94. Production of corn, wheat, soybeans, and grain sorghum totaled about 625 billion pounds. About 7 pounds per day for 1 year for every American. A total of 2 pounds per person per day of these basic staples in the proportions shown in Table 9.2 would be sufficient to provide the essentials of an adequate vegetarian diet weighing about 27 ounces. Grain sorghum is not listed in Table 9.2. It has approximately the same food value as corn. The remaining 5 ounces of the 2 pounds would feed enough chickens to meet a survivor's minimum long-term requirement for animal protein. If corn, wheat, grain sorghum, and soybeans were the only crops raised, the annual production would need to be only 730 pounds per person. Our 1985 annual production would have supplied every adult, child, and infant in a population of 100 million with 6,250 pounds of these 4 staples. This is more than 8 times enough to maintain good nutrition by Chinese standards. Recovery from a massive nuclear attack would depend largely on sufficient food reserves being available to enable survivors to concentrate on restoring the essentials of mechanized farming. Enough housing would remain intact or could be built to provide adequate shelter for the first few crucial years. Enough clothing and fabrics would be available, but if survivors were forced by hunger to expend their energies attempting primitive subsistence farming, many deaths from starvation would occur, and the prospects for national recovery would be greatly reduced. Americans' greatest survival asset at the end of 1985 was about 7 billion bushels, about 850 billion pounds of wheat, corn, grain sorghums, and soybeans in storage. That's highlighted. Mostly on farms. If 200 million Americans were to survive a limited nuclear attack, and if only half of this stored food reserve could be delivered to the needy, each bucket stove with a few pounds of dry wood or newspaper for fuel. Hold on. Oh, wait, yeah, I jumped into the next page. Hold on, let's go back. If 200 million Americans were to survive a limited nuclear attack, and if only half of this stored food reserve could be delivered to the needy, each survivor would have adequate food for over 3 years by Chinese nutritional standards. In view of the crucial importance of large food reserves to the prospects for individual and national survival, it is to be hoped that U.S. food surpluses and large annual carryovers will continue. A basic survival ration to store. A ration composed of the basic foods listed below in Table 9.3, provides about 2,600 calories per day and is nutritionally balanced. It keeps better than a ration of typical American foods, requires much less space to store or transport, and is much less expensive. The author and some friends have stored enough of these basic foods to last their families several months during a crisis, and have eaten large quantities of these foods with satisfaction over the past 20 years. A different emergency ration should be stored for infants and very small children, as will be explained in the following section. Field tests have indicated that the majority of Americans would find these basic foods acceptable under crisis conditions. In normal times, however, no one should store this or any other emergency food supply until after he has prepared, eaten, and found its components satisfactory. Unprocessed grains and beans provide adequate nourishment for many millions of the world's people who have little else to eat. Dry grains and beans are very compact. A 5-gallon can holds about 38 pounds of hard wheat. Yet when cooked, dry whole grains become bulky and give a well-fed feeling. A distinct advantage if it is necessary to go on short rations during a prolonged crisis. This basic ration has two disadvantages. Number one, it requires cooking. And number two, Americans are unaccustomed to such a diet. Cooking difficulties can be minimized by having a grain grinding device. Table 9.3. A basic ration, survival ration for multi-year storage. It shows whole kernel hard wheat. It says 16 ounces per day, 454 grams per day, 30.0 pounds for 30 days full ration, 13.6 kilograms for 30 days full ration. Beans, 5 ounces per day, 142 grams per day, 9.4 pounds for 30 days full ration, 4.3 kilograms for 30 days full ration. Non-fat milk powder, 2 ounces per day, 57 grams per day, 3.8 pounds for 30 days full ration, and 1.7 kilograms for 30 days full ration. Vegetable oil, 1 ounce per day, 28 grams per day, 1.9 pounds for 30 days full ration, 0.9 kilograms for 30 days full ration. Sugar, 2 ounces per day, 57 grams per day, 3.8 pounds for 30 days full ration, 1.7 kilograms for 30 days full ration. Salt, iodized, 1/3 ounce per day, 10 grams per day, 0.63 pounds for 30 days full ration, 0.3 kilograms for 30 days full ration. And then I guess all added together, it says total weights. And then it says 26 and 1/3 ounces per day, I guess all together, adding all those together. 748 grams per day, 49.5 pounds for 30 days full ration, and 22.5 kilograms for 30 days full ration. Multivitamin pills. It says 1 pill each day. End of page. Page 95. Bucket stove with a few pounds of dry wood or newspapers for fuel, and the know-how to make fireless cooker by using available insulating materials, such as extra clothing. The disadvantage of starting to eat unaccustomed foods at a stressful time can be lessened by eating more whole grains and beans in normal times, thereby, incidentally, saving money and improving a typical American diet by reducing fat and increasing bulk and fiber. When storing enough of this ration to last for several months or a year, it is best to select several kinds of beans for variety and improve nutrition. If soybeans are included, take into account the differences between soybeans and common beans as noted earlier in this chapter. In many areas, it is difficult to buy wheat and beans at prices nearly as low as the farmer receives for these commodities. However, in an increasing number of communities, at least one store sells whole grain wheat and beans in large sacks at reasonable prices. Mormons who store food for a range of possible personal and natural disasters are often the best sources of information about where to get basic foods in quantity at reasonable cost. Soon after purchase, bulk foods should be removed from sacks, but not necessarily from sealed plastic liner bags, and sealed in metal containers or in thick-walled plastic containers for storage, especially in the more humid parts of the United States. Grain and beans should be frequently checked for moisture. If necessary, these foods should be dried out and rid of insects as described later in this chapter. Vegetable oil stores as well in plastic bottles as in glass ones. The toughness and lightness of plastic bottles makes them better than glass for carrying when evacuating or for using in a shelter. Since a pound of oil provides about 2 1/4 times as much energy as does a pound of sugar, dry grain, or milk powder, storing additional vegetable oil is an efficient way to improve a grain diet and make it more like the 40% fat diet of typical Americans. All multivitamin pills providing 5,000 international units, 1,500 milligrams retinol equivalent, vitamin A, 400 IU, 10 milligrams of vitamin D, and 50 to 100 milligrams of vitamin C must meet U.S. governmental standards. So the least expensive usually are quite adequate. Storage in a refrigerator greatly lengthens the time before vitamin pills must be replaced with fresh ones. Because vitamin C is so essential, yet very inexpensive and long-lasting, it is prudent to store a large bottle. It would be wise to have on hand, ready to eat, Compact foods for use during a week or two in a shelter, in addition to those normally kept in the kitchen. It is not necessary to buy expensive survival foods or the special dehydrated foods carried by many backpackers. All large food stores sell the following concentrated foods: non-fat milk powder, canned peanuts, compact ready-to-eat dry cereals such as grape nuts, canned meat and fish, white sugar, vegetable oil in plastic bottles, iodized salt, and daily multivitamin pills. If shelter occupants have a way to boil water, see figures 9.2 and 9.3, bucket stove, it is advisable to include rice, noodles, and an instant cooked cereal such as oatmeal or wheat, along with coffee and tea for those who habitually drink these beverages. Parched grain is a ready-to-eat food that has been used for thousands of years. Whole kernel wheat, corn, and rice can be parched by the following method. Place the kernels about 1/4 inch deep in a pan, a skillet, or a tin can while shaking it over a flame, hot coals, or a red hot electric burner. The kernels will puff and brown slightly when parched. These parched grains are not difficult to chew and can be pounded to a meal more easily than can the raw kernels. Parched grain stores well if kept dry and free of insects. Emergency food for babies. Infants and very small children would be the first victims of starvation after a heavy nuclear attack, unless special preparations are made on their behalf. Our huge stocks of unprocessed foods, which could prevent the majority of unprepared survivors from dying of hunger, would not be suitable for the very young. They need foods that are more concentrated and less rough. Most American mothers do not nurse their infants. And if a family's supply of baby foods were exhausted, the parents might experience the agony of seeing their baby slowly starve. Few Americans have watched babies starving. In China, I saw anguish on starving mothers' faces as they patted and squeezed their flat breasts, trying to get a little more milk into their weak babies' mouths. I saw this unforgettable tragedy in the midst of tens of thousands of Chinese evacuating on foot before a ruthless Japanese army during World War II. Years later, my wife and I stored several, end of page, to be continued,